the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here on a Wednesday. We've got a good show on tap for you. We're going to open up the phone lines, and we're going to talk legal issues specifically, and this is where I think you're going to be very interested. We're going to be talking about some of the very specific high-profile cases that we're dealing with either currently right now or a couple that, are still in the works and are just dragging on that many of you have followed, that I've done a lot of stories on. We're going to open it up for you and invite you to join in the conversation to ask about some of the questions about how they're handling these cases. And we're going to be talking about it. It's kind of like I'm stepping back into our gavel-to-gavel coverage because my good friend, and yes, he is a friend beyond a professional colleague, legal analyst Nick Leonardo. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see you, Nick.
It's good to be back.
Two Nicks back together.
That's right.
It's just like putting on an old glove. There we go.
We spent a lot of time here.
We're ready. Yeah, you do. It's been a while, and it's interesting. Some people, just because I mentioned that, may be wondering, you have any gavel-to-gavel trials coming up on the horizon. We've been watching for them. I think there's a couple that, if and when they happen, will go. We talked about this before, the Delkey Hambrick case, the law enforcement officer in Metro, maybe. If that goes, you hear any word on when that could possibly go to trial? We're thinking sometime next year, aren't we?
Probably so. I haven't heard anything other than it just kind of been, it's been kind of quiet, I guess.
That'll be an interesting one. Another one we thought that might be kind of interesting is the nurse at Vanderbilt who is charged with the crime for giving the wrong medicine by an accident. Okay, these accidents, and she's charged with a crime. I think that's a fascinating case to follow.
That is a fascinating case, but I think in a case like that, it's a low-grade felony. She has no prior criminal history, so that's one that you're likely to see reach a resolution.
Great point. Great point. All right. Well, listen, a couple of things. We'll open up the phone line 737-7587. I thought we would start with the case out of Sumner County, the mass murder. We now understand 8 victims. We understand Michael Cummins, the suspect. Before we get into the details of that, I just want to talk across the board, and I hear this a lot from our viewers. They get frustrated, and they need to understand why this is. But be it the Antioch church shooting, be it the Waffle House shooting, be it this mass murder, every time, okay, be it the Joe Clyde Daniels case, all of the suspects in this case, right off the bat, they need to go have a mental evaluation. And then everyone's crying out, they're going to try to get, insanity, to get a slap on the wrist and get off. First of all, I say that's never going to work. But in every single one of these cases, Nick, okay, and I think it's because in the absence of any other defense, they're going to get a mental evaluation, which delays everything. Why is it?
Well, you're exactly right, but anybody who commits a crime like that, obviously there's something going on.
I don't need an evaluation to tell me someone who commits a mass murder has got some screw loose between the ears. Okay?
Well, and you want to make sure.
But that doesn't excuse them.
If you're the trial judge, that this individual does have, is competent to assist in their defense, because there are decisions that have to be made along the way in a criminal defense or a prosecution, and you need to make sure that the criminally accused is competent enough to understand exactly what's going on. And so I think the mental evaluation for people that engage in those kind of behaviors is something that that we should do to make sure that we get it right. And we saw with the Waffle House shooter, for a period of time, he was found to be incompetent, I believe, by Judge Fishburne. And I know there was a lot of disappointment by the victim's family, but now he has been found to be competent. So that situation can improve over time.
If you would just explain to folks, and this is the kind of stuff I know you learned in law school, and why it is that way, because someone's going to sit there and say, look, Travis Ranking, Waffle House shooter, there is no doubt he did it. There's none. I know he's not been convicted yet, but I'm not even going to say alleged. He did it, all right? So people are going to say, I don't care if he has a screw loose or not. He went in there and started shooting up a Waffle House. Let's try him. Let's go. Why does it matter? And now I'm saying this playing devil's advocate. I understand why this is.
Right.
But explain why, because they're going to say, look, the dude did it. We don't care. We don't care. Take him to trial, and if he doesn't understand what's going on, too bad. Convict him and put him away. That's what, I'll tell you, a vast majority of people that I hear from sometime on Facebook are saying. Explain why that's not the way the legal system is set up.
Well, so there's several different aspects that you could address from that, but one of them being the fiscal note. Okay, the fact that this person is going to spend the rest of their life in prison, and they're somewhat of a young man, and so they're going to sit there and they're going to do all these appeals over time, post convictions, habeas corpus, all these different appeals to try to overturn their convictions. And so we want to make sure, if you're the trial judge, that you get it right, that he is competent, and that you do things by the book, and that his constitutional rights are protected, so that there's not a basis or some sort of avenue on down the road for him to try to overturn his convictions and have to try it again.
Okay, and that's what I was getting at. The basis and what you learned in law school is that if someone completely does not understand the difference, and you can prove this, between right and wrong, and is completely incompetent, then it's difficult to hold them responsible for a crime because they really didn't know what they were doing is wrong. And I guess I can understand that. If eating an ice cream cone is the same as killing someone, truly in someone's mind, it's hard to say, well, that's a bad person because he's so out to lunch, he doesn't know he's doing wrong. Is that right? Is that kind of the thinking?
I mean, that is the thinking. I mean, we've, for the longest of times, we've been concerned somewhat of mental health issues, and we're learning more as we go. But I mean, even the Supreme Court addressed that, years ago and said that a person with an IQ below a certain point, isn't eligible to be put to death, because they didn't know. And of course, in Tennessee, they would have to show by the highest evidentiary standard, which is clear and convincing. The defense would have to show by clear and convincing evidence that that defendant was suffering from a disease of the mind and was not capable of understanding what he was doing was wrong, essentially.
Have you ever seen that?
Well, you see it raised all the time.
No, have you ever seen it successfully argued?
In front of a trier of fact,
I'm sure
maybe
it's
a couple of times.
Somewhere nationally.
But it's important for the viewers to understand that if there was a finding of insanity, it's not like the judge cuts the person loose and they're back on the street.
Explain that too. A lot of people think, look, here's my take. If somehow they can prove that Michael Cummins, who's accused of these 8 murders, is mentally, out and can't be tried criminally in that way, I've said there's no way on earth, regardless, he will ever breathe free air again. He may not go to a prison, but he's not going to be let go back into society under any circumstance. Right. So he'll go somewhere. So it doesn't mean that he's going to be let go if they prove that he's insane.
Correct.
What does it mean?
Well, it means that the trial judge could commit them to a mental health facility, which they're still in lockdown.
Got one right over there off of Stewart's Ferry.
MTMHI.
That's
correct.
Right there in Hermitage.
And that person could be locked up for the rest of their life in a mental health institution. Okay, so again, it's not that they're off to the Tennessee Department of Corrections. They send them to a different facility, but in either event, they're not, just let go and return to the street, because, especially if they're a danger to themselves or others. But there's a long statute on point about this that sets forth what the trial judge could do, and it's lengthy and it's very detailed.
Okay, well, we've already got some calls. We'll take some of those, and then we can get into a little bit on this Cummins case. You and I talked for a story I did earlier this week that had a lot of reaction, a lot of people very interested in the lone survivor in this attack, the grandmother, and her role possibly in the prosecution and what she remembers. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's take a call or two from, start off with Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
Just a comment or two. It seems like a lot of these rape cases, for instance, the guy up in Minnesota throwed the little boy off of a balcony, almost killed him.
I saw that. Yep.
Now his family's coming forward and saying, well, he's had problems for a long time. Well, I understand that, but why wait till they do something like this to bring this out, that this person is mentally unstable, to kill 8 people or throw somebody off of a balcony?
All right, fair question. And I always think of the movie Minority Report starring Tom Cruise, not one of his finer efforts, but that whole idea was that they could look to the future and predict someone about to commit a crime, and thus they would arrest them before they did, which, of course, you cannot prosecute someone for something you think they're going to do.
No, but we are seeing a shift in some of these cases, and we saw it with Travis Rinking's father being charged with a crime for having, given him
weapons when he should have known better.
That's exactly right. So I do think we're seeing a shift, and we may see, it's going to be up to each state and that legislative body to create or codify some sort of crime for, knowing that somebody, maybe was going to do something like that and not taking any action or aiding that person in that action. And I think we're seeing more and more legislatures take that up.
I think you're right. All right, now, but the question of the mental illness and a family being aware of it, The Michael Cummins case, it's come out that this guy, as part of a bond that he was released out on for an arson case the year before, was required to go get some mental health treatment. Now, you and I both know, and talking to Sheriff Hall and Davidson, there aren't a lot of mental health or drug beds out there for folks, okay?
Especially for free.
And for free, and that's my point. And so he actually, they were saying, was at a facility, but had been discharged a week before these murders were committed or a month before, because he couldn't afford to pay. And the insurance wasn't going to be there, so they discharged him. And I don't begrudge the place that discharged him. They have to make a living. Someone has to pay him. They can't just do this for free. The general public doesn't want to pay for social services to provide for mental health. But then they complain like crazy, like, well, why wasn't he someplace? You see the rub there? There aren't beds. And this guy, a lot of people say, could have been prevented from committing these alleged crimes, killing 8 people, had he gotten some of the mental health treatment he was seeking.
Well, and I had heard initially that he was on probation in Sumner County, and he was actually not in good standing, or he was in violation of his probation.
In part because he wasn't seeking the mental health treatment he needed.
And so the question becomes is, how long did they wait to issue a probation violation warrant? How long did that sit around? And I know that probation officers and the legal system, they do their jobs, and sometimes it's hard to find these individuals, but could they have picked him up sooner on this probation violation? And if they had, would that made a difference? That's something we'll never know, but I do think it potentially could be ripe for a civil lawsuit.
Okay. Saying that, hey, he should have been picked up sooner because there were but you and I both know, and if you know people, and I know several people or their family members who have loved ones that are on probation, and not for serious crimes like this, and they violate it left and right, and the probation officer rarely is even checking in on them. And I'm guessing part of the reason is because some of these probation officers have so many cases. Maybe they prioritize for the most serious offenders and follow them, but some of these more minor ones, I know, I can name you 3 people right off the bat that I know are on probation that violate the rules of their probation, not in a significant way, but meeting curfew, things like that, every single day, and nothing is done.
Well, now, having been a former judge in domestic violence here in Nashville, one of the things that was most sensitive to me were these probation violations. And so as a judge, I acted immediately when I found out that somebody had a warrant and it needed to be signed. It was something that we took very seriously because, we need to get that person picked up. And a lot of times it's new charges, and it could be potentially against the same, alleged victim. So you need to make sure as the judge that you sign those probation violations as soon as possible. And some of them, we don't put bonds on them because they don't need to be released before they come back before a judge, especially if it involved the same sort of conduct or the same victim.
We're going to a break. I'm glad you mentioned bond, because I want you to talk about why it is someone like Michael Cummins, accused of 8 murders, is not entitled to a bond. We'll get into that. We'll take more phone calls. Paul and others, if you're there. If you have a question about any of these high-profile cases, including, some we've followed, Joe Clyde Daniels, we can also touch bases on what's the latest on the Holly Bobo case and some of these more recent ones as well. Nick Leonardo and I will walk you through some of the laws of it all right after this. Stay with us.